a room. But these were the best known of them. And they left behind, all but two of them are gone now, but they left behind Americans who they trained in their methods and their philosophy, and sometimes ordained as swamis or whatever, and who have now carry on their legacy in their centers, their ashrams, and other teaching locations around the U.S. And there were some of your great masters of this land never came to America, but have had a huge impact on American life because of who they were, their stature, what was written by them and about them, and teachers who were influenced by them who represent their teachings to the world. Sri Aurobindo and Ramana Maharshi are far better known now than when they were alive in the West, and they've been gone 63 years now. Sri Aurobindo has had a very powerful impact on certain psychologists and psychological theorists. And one hopes that someday he gets the credit he deserves for changing the way they understand the mind and consciousness, and the theories of human development have evolved out of certain insights of his. Ramana Maharshi is probably, other than Yogananda, the face most recognized as, the enlightened Indian. And that tradition continues into the present with gurus and swamis who still come. These are the two most popular ones. Amma hugs, tens of thousands of Americans every year when she comes, and Sri Ravi Shankar has centers throughout the country, and he advertises my book. If that picture were widened, you see me standing next to him. That's the American edition. We changed it to sannyasi color for the paperback. But I was showing him the picture of him in the book, but I love showing it. But it wasn't just the gurus and the swamis, and they had the hugest impact. But it was also the translations of the texts, and that we now have more and more and more of them, than we ever had before, and they're more good translations, respectful translations than ever before, by scholars who are not just interested in India's past and in India's literature, but are practitioners themselves. There's a whole lot of American scholars of religion, scholars of Hinduism, scholars of South Asian studies, who, when, like me, I'm not an academic, but many people of my generation who took to yoga and Vedanta and had gurus and came here to go to ashrams, and they woke up one day and said, well, gee, how am I going to earn a living? I know, I'll become a professor of religion. And they've changed the way dharmic religions are being taught in America in higher education. And as I said, some of the people whose minds, whose understanding of life and the world were changed by the study of yoga and Vedanta and Hindu Dharma in general, and Buddhist Dharma, became hugely important figures in American life. And through them, through their books, their lectures, their television appearances, millions of people awakened to the Sanatana Dharma essence of the teachings, because they would absorb the ideas and integrate them into their own fields of expertise and other sources of information, and communicate it to the American public in ways that we were capable of receiving. And especially those people who were not inclined to go see gurus. They'd much rather listen to an American intellectual say the same thing, because there was a different relationship you could have with that person. And they didn't necessarily have religious overtones. They were philosophers and psychologists and so forth. So therefore, you weren't getting involved in some weird religion. So, for example, this is Swami Prabhavananda, who ran the Vedanta Center in Los Angeles for many, many years, a great scholar of Vedanta, well, he's pictured here in American clothes. He liked doing that. So he's one of the Ramakrishna mission swamis, and in the 1940s and 50s, some of America's leading intellectuals, especially West Coast intellectuals, that was their sort of place to go for spiritual information and learning. And this is, in the middle is Aldous Huxley, one of the giants of Western thought, and Christopher Isherwood, one of the great novelists and writers in the Western idiom. They studied with him, and one of the things they did was say, let's have a press. We'll start the Vedanta Press. We'll publish a journal. We'll publish books. And because people like Aldous Huxley were among the writers, millions of people took this seriously for the first time and read them. The very first book on Vedanta I ever read was an anthology of writing by Western intellectuals and Vedanta Society swamis called Vedanta for the Western World, that they wrote. They did translations of the Gita and other books, that huge impact. And just to name one other example, that is Swami Satprakashananda, who ran the Vedanta Center in the Midwest city of St. Louis for many years. That's Houston Smith, who, as a young man, had his first teaching job as a professor of religion in St. Louis. He met the Swami, studied with him, and his whole perspective on what religion is and how to explain the different religions of the world changed in a profound way. And he went on to write the most important textbook on comparative religion in recent American history. And it's very different. His treatment of the world's religions is very different from what had come before and often continued to happen. And if you read it, you see, oh, this guy's studied Sanatana, this guy studied Vedanta. It's obvious what he's emphasizing in his perspective. He also wrote the foreword to my book, I'm honored to say. And those are just two examples. There are other very important, influential thinkers like Joseph Campbell and American poets and European poets, T.S. Eliot, Walt Whitman, William Butler Yeats, Allen Ginsberg. You read their poetry, you see dharmic teachings and language written into it. Novelists, Hermann Hesse, Somerset Maugham, who modeled one of his characters after Ramana Maharshi, and J.D. Salinger, the great modern American writer who studied at the Vedanta Center in New York and wrote about characters in American characters in the 1950s and 60s trying to achieve moksha and still live in the world, which was a source of great inspiration for crazy people like me who were exploring these ideas. And in scientists, Schrodinger and Oppenheimer and so many great scientists who were also Vedantic thinkers. And psychologists, from William James, who knew Vivekananda, to Abraham Maslow, who changed the way psychology understands human potential and what is possible for human life. All these people were influenced by the teachings that come from your rishis and transformed their disciplines and communicated to millions of people. Excuse me. And some of the people doing this kind of transmission were actually Western religious leaders.